in something called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which in some ways was benign towards especially the settlers, those who lived in New Mexico, those who lived in Texas, those who lived in California. Their rights would be respected, basically. I think the Americans sort of understood that they had kind of cheated the Mexicans out of a significant area. This huge area called the Mexican Cession will become part of the United States of America. The United States did pay them $15 million for it. So I always thought to myself, if this is perceived as a clean victory, you don't necessarily pay the people that you take the land from. But clearly there were some issues with how the American acquired this. And anyway, the thing in the story is these settlers move into Texas and they start just an incredible dialectic of events, which will lead ultimately to not just American acquisition of Texas, but American acquisition of the vast majority of the southwestern part of the United States of America. So that becomes a pretty big deal. Anyway, I do want to mention that there's other stories too. Here's the story of Oregon real quickly. I told you that the Lewis and Clark will lay claim to the area, of course, but the British already had a claim. But in the 1840s, American entrepreneurs began to entice Americans to go settle primarily in what we call the Willamette Valley. The Willamette Valley is a beautiful valley that runs sort of north-south, heading up towards the Columbia. The end of that valley, of course, is where Portland, Oregon is. If you guys know that area, it is really attractive. It's Corvallis, of course. It's Eugene, Oregon, Oregon State, University of Oregon. Really nice area. And land speculators sort of played up the beauty of the area, and it attracted settlers beginning about 1844 for a significant kind of migration of Americans across, going the Jedediah Smith route, at that time, of course, becoming the Oregon Trail, facing all kinds of difficulties, I'm sure you guys know, and making their way finally into the area of Oregon, and even beyond that, to the north into Washington. Now, what happened was that the British have their claim on the area, right? But they kind of see the writing on the wall. And they realize the Americans, just by virtue of the settling of the area, are beginning to take it over. So the British began to try to move for negotiation. Let's just figure out a boundary here somewhere, okay? And Polk had this extraordinary campaign slogan, 5440 or fight. So 5440 would be a boundary way up at the very top of British Columbia. And of course the British are going, what the hell are you talking about? 5440 or fight. They will ultimately settle upon, is it the 39th parallel? I can't remember where it is, darn it. But then right here, of course, you have this long boundary established as a negotiation between the United States and Great Britain, extending, of course, the boundary all the way to basically the Pacific, the Puget Sound area. Do note that the British did not give, the southern part of Vancouver Island. They wanted that to retain in their hands, so which does dip south of the line. Little anomalies. There's a little piece of America that dips below the line right here. That the only way you can get to it, of course, is by boat if you don't cross through Canada. And there's a little thing up here that I've always wondered, what the heck? Why is that America? So I want to, maybe one of you will do a project on that to tell me why that little part of, which seems fairly far north of the American border, would become part of the United States. California is a somewhat different story. California will see a number of settlers that come into it during the California period, during the Mexican period, primarily settling generally in the area of Sacramento, around Sutter's Fort. Now, there's not, there's like 600 of them or something like that at the time of this Mexican-American War. But prior to the beginning of the military conflict in California, a group of them will call themselves Los Osos, and ironically, of course, Americans using a Spanish word for the bear, describing themselves. They will ride into Sonoma, I think it's in June the 13th, 1846. They're going to take over the properties of Mariano Vallejo. He was the Don of the North, and they're going to sort of force him at least to surrender. And in doing this, of course, it's the beginning of what they think is they're going to take over the entire area. The biggest thing that will come out of this is just this kind of interesting little trivial moment in many ways, in the larger story. But they make a flag, and the flag has a bear on it, has a star, and it says California Republic on the whole thing. So, there's this little moment there, the bear flag revolt, of course, which if nothing else created the flag as far as California is concerned. And within a month, the military, the Navy is there beginning to take over. So, settlers are not just moving into Texas, but settlers are moving into Oregon, settlers are moving into California, and simply by their presence, they're beginning to push, of course, the boundaries of the United States and the frontier. And the American government kind of has to respond to that. Excuse me. So I have one last frontier that I will do for you guys. It's called the mining frontier. I'm going to tell you that story, though, next time. Okay.